Okay, welcome everybody to this weekly briefing of ELNET. Today, we are very honored to have with us a member of the European Parliament, Lukas Mandl. Lukas Mandl has been an Austrian member of the European Parliament since 2017. He currently chairs the EPP group, which is the largest group in the European Parliament, basically the Christian Democrats. And he's chairing the EPP group in the Committee of Development, and he serves on the Committee on Legal Affairs and the Committee of Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. And he is head of the cross-party Abraham Accords network in the European Parliament, which will be the main topic of our discussions today. And he was elected the president of the Assembly of the European Regions in 2025. Previously, Mr. Mandl served as the vice chair of the Committee on Defense and as a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Home Affairs. And his parliamentary work has focused extensively on European security, transatlantic relations, migration policy, the Western Balkans, and strengthening cooperation between Europe, Israel, and key democratic allies, including, of course, the United States, where I know he travels very often. Member of Parliament Mandl is a strong supporter of the Transatlantic Alliance, as mentioned, and European cooperation with Israel, while also advocating for deeper European engagement in the Western Balkans. In addition, China and the US are also key regions of Mandl's work. And as I just understood, you actually just came back from a visit to China. So thank you so much for making yourself available to join us here today with ELNET. As mentioned, today we will discuss the topic of the Abraham Accord. Since October 7, the Middle East have undergone a profound strategic transformation. While many expected the Abraham Accords to fracture under the pressure of war and regional instability, cooperation between Israel and key Arab partners has largely endured and in some areas even deepened. In fact, the region's war with Iran has produced unprecedented security coordination between Israel, the United States, and pragmatic Arab states. Increasing cooperation on missile defense, intelligence sharing, maritime security, and strategic technology is reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and raising hopes about the emergence of a new regional alignment aimed at counterbalancing the Iranian influence. Now, of course, the question is, can the Abraham Accords evolve from a diplomatic normalization into a lasting strategic alliance, one that includes possibly in the future Saudi Arabia? And then, of course, the central question to a lot of that, what we will discuss today, what role can Europe play to help facilitate this new order? So, as mentioned, and this will be an introduction of my first question to you, Lukas, if I may address you like that. The Abraham Accords reshaped regional diplomacy by creating formal ties between Israel, key Arab states, especially the UAE, Bahrain, and of course Morocco. And after the 7th of October, many expected these agreements to collapse under the regional pressure. Yet they endured. From your perspective, did 7th of October weaken the accords politically, or did it prove that strategic cooperation between Israel and Arab partners has become irreversible? And how should Europe position itself towards this emerging regional framework? Because initially, the Abraham Accords and all the initiatives that followed received, if I may summarize it like that, quite a hesitant and somewhat critical approach from the European side. Of course, a lot of this happened just after Qatargate happened in the European Parliament, which was a big bribing scandal by the Qatari government of, amongst others, one of the vice presidents of the European Parliament, which really changed the view of many in a negative way of Arab states in general, which was, of course, unfortunate, but this is how it worked. And there is the EU's general hesitant and reluctant approach to fully engage with Gulf states due to human rights and rule of law concerns. And then there is, of course, the often heard negative approach towards the Abraham Accords, suggesting that it would undermine any progress towards a two-state solution and harm the position of the Palestinians in general. So it's a bit of a general introduction, but yeah, may I ask you to reflect on that, and thank you again for joining us, and I hope we'll have a good conversation. And just for all the people that are with us, as usually, we will have a conversation, and after that, we will open it for questions and answers. So please do not hesitate to enter any questions you might have in the chat box of the Zoom. Lukas, if I may give you the floor, please.
Thank you very much. To be quick with a brief answer on your first question, the Abraham Accords proved to be strong, and this especially after October 7, 2023. So in that regard, I would say the political weight, political gravity of the Abraham Accords has risen, has increased. But first and foremost, I want to thank you for having me in this important Monday format today. And I want to thank generally ELNET for an extremely important, I would say essential contribution to also our political sphere in Brussels on the European level, and also when it comes to activities with parliament members, because a parliament member is, as you all know, very much dependent on reliable partners. Any given information has to be trustworthy, because the daily work schedule is too short to double check sometimes. And ELNET is such a trustworthy partner. You, Mattis, personally are such a trustworthy partner on the European ground. I want to thank you in person also for your friendship and for the long-standing cooperation we have. Also in the field of the Abraham Accords, we will talk about that maybe later today, definitely. I also want to share with you that as well, members of member states' parliaments and members of the European Parliament had a very early chance to pay respect to the Israeli people briefly after the October 7, 2023 attacks due to ELNET and thanks to ELNET, because ELNET made it happen that this was possible that time, and this is only one peak of enormously good, substantial activities of ELNET, and also when it comes to content and information, as I said, to have reliable information is of utmost importance, crucial, and that's what ELNET provides. So I think also all in the United States and elsewhere who support ELNET, who make ELNET what it is. When it comes to the Abraham Accords, I had the privilege to take over this leadership of the Abraham Accords multi-partisan group in the European Parliament after the founder who had established that network in the European Parliament dropped out of the parliament, as it unfortunately happens in politics sometimes. David Lega from Sweden has been a great colleague now in another area, but he took the initiative to make this happen, multi-partisan Abraham Accords network in the European Parliament, which also exists in other parliaments. I want to share also that matter of fact with you, that in the Parliament of Germany, we have Armin Laschet leading the former frontrunner for the Chancellery, Prime Minister's office in Germany, and long-standing parliamentarian. We have in Westminster in the UK an Abraham Accords group headed by Right Honourable Sir Liam Fox, who I can say became a strong partner, a strong ally in these activities worldwide. This Westminster group, or this Liam Fox group, is also very much contributing in winning projects and in establishing cooperation between various Abraham Accords countries, especially between Israel and Arab countries, not only in the field of immediate business, but also in the field of education, innovation, and so on. And then we have, of course, the Abraham Accords caucus in the Congress, in the US Congress, also bipartisan. In that case, I'm in strong contact with Brett Schneider, a Democrat, who is co-chairing that with a Republican colleague in our partner parliament, the US Congress, as we can also be assumed to be the EU Congress, if you want to compare them. So it had started because the Abraham Accords are very promising. And I want to share from a European perspective why. Everything Martin has outlined already is something I totally agree with, and we have to take into account. As I said, the Abraham Accords have proved to be strong, and the gravity has risen. And at the same time, something is true from a European perspective, which must not be underestimated. The Abraham Accords are about to start, or have already started, in a very similar way as the European integration. Today's European Union has started 80 years ago with economic cooperation of former enemies. I repeat it, because this is exactly the same pattern. Economic cooperation of former enemies. And they were bloody enemies, as you all might be aware, not only in the Second World War, also in the First World War, and over centuries. So it was an attempt, a visionary approach on European soil, which worked pretty well. We all have to reform our societies and countries. We have to give freedom to our societies and reform our state systems, I would say. So we have our duties, homework to do a lot every day, but generally one can easily say that the European integration is a success story. And that's what I share with colleagues on European level who have doubts whether the Abraham Accords are a good thing, whether they can sustain, whether the approach is right. Some would then claim it's only about business, as if there would be something like only business. It's business and economy, and that's the backbone of every society, every state. It's exactly how the European integration also started, and this is an important factor to better understand the whole endeavor from a European perspective. And when it comes to the Middle East and to the Abraham Accords themselves, it's inspiring that not only after October 7, 2023, but also due to all the waves that happened afterwards, politically, militarily, with Iran, which is a regime that has sanctioned me in January 23 already. So I think I know what we are dealing with here. But through all these waves, the Abraham Accords could sustain. I had a very good meeting with a government member from the United Arab Emirates the other week in Strasbourg, where the European Parliament has its seat. And nobody doubts, I mean, not on this level and not on decision-taking levels, nobody doubts that it's the better choice to keep the Abraham Accords up for generations to come. And I will leave it there for the moment to not make it a monologue today. But these are some remarks from my side that I feel to be crucial.
No, thank you very much, Lukas, and also thank you for your warm words about ELNET as an organization. I mean, we work a lot together. It's a great pleasure, and indeed, as you mentioned, we were with a group of members of parliament just a bit over a week after 7th of October in Israel, and you were part of the people who joined this delegation, which was extremely impactful. And and thank you again for joining us because obviously this was something that changed the Middle East, and as an organization we believed, and we still believe, it's only by being there and seeing things with your own eyes that you can really experience the reality on the grounds. And this is also why we are building with you and other members of the European Parliament a possible delegation after the summer to Israel and the UAE, but we can touch upon that a little bit later. Just to touch on the point that you just made, that you met with UAE officials in Strasbourg recently, maybe also to hear from you on their perspective. Before the 7th of October, the Abraham Accords were largely discussed in terms of diplomacy, trade, innovation. But as you also mentioned, increasingly they're viewed as a basis of a new regional security architecture. We've seen growing cooperation in intelligence sharing, air defense coordination. I mean, the Iron Dome, the Israeli Iron Dome, was placed in the United Arab Emirates to protect against Iranian missiles, which is a huge thing. Maritime security, strategic cooperation against Iran and its proxies. And do you believe that the Accords have evolved from a normalization project into a genuine strategic alliance, or is there still a lot of growth possible? Maybe also interesting to hear, how the UAE sees this, what you heard in this conversation, and more broadly, do you think we are seeing the emergence of a pro-Western regional bloc capable of counterbalancing Iran, but also the growing Russian and Chinese influence in the Middle East? And do you think, experience, see, feel the Europeans view it that way as well?
Very important questions. And the first thing I want to share is growth is important. Growth is possible. Growth also in terms of countries joining the Abraham Accords. And there are experts, as you all know, who say, and future historians will dig deeper onto that October 7, 2023, with the proxies of the Iranian Mullah regime, in that case with Hamas and its followers, among other things, and maybe mainly happened because of Saudi Arabia being close to joining the Abraham Accords. I'm only quoting experts and I'm only referring to future historians because I can't state that firsthand from my side, but it's very probable, if I connect the dots, that this was one of the motives to cause distraction, chaos, and worse in the region. But it didn't achieve the goal to destroy the Abraham Accords. And it also didn't lead to a scenario where we would be forever excluded that Saudi Arabia or others would ever join. Matis, you said in the beginning that Europe is always concerned about countries which are not fully fledged democracies. That's true. We will also remain concerned regarding that. But we have to also face that it's better to talk than not to talk. And it's better to do cooperation instead of confrontation. There are parts of the world rather focusing and choosing the pathway of confrontation. Europe has a good history of the pathway of cooperation to the inside and should also follow that line to the outside and should also foster endeavors of cooperation in other parts of the world. And that's exactly what the Abraham Accords are. My vision would be for one day to have a free trade agreement between the EU and the Abraham Accords. This is the best thing the EU can contribute to, beside political talk, like I do today, and beside diplomacy and many other things which are also important, but a concrete step in doing a part, a positive part, substantial, sustainable part in the Abraham Accords for the EU would be to create such a free trade agreement. And free trade agreements are the way the EU generally very much fosters ties with other parts of the world. I just had an appointment here in Vienna with the ambassador of Ecuador. Ecuador is not fully included in the Mercosur agreement Europe has just made with Latin America. But Ecuador is a kind of observer country within the Mercosur countries, the large ones in Latin America. So the European approach would always be the one of cooperation economically. And of course, we should see it in a very broad way, a broad horizon, and see the Abraham Accords in their entirety. And there's a second point I want to share with you here, because as you can imagine, in the media, in public debate, in each member state of the European Union with a bit of a different tone, but everywhere also war in Middle East, violence is discussed, has been discussed over the years. And people forget to see the positive outlook. And the positive outlook is something we can always remind of, and this is the Abraham Accords again. There is a future perspective for the region. And if I share with you now that already many months ago, with high-ranking people, for example, from the UK, we have discussed, maybe a stabilized Iran after the Mullah regime will have fallen, which is not very probable to happen soon at the moment. We have to be clear about that. But one day, not only Abraham Accords would counterbalance, I think that's the word or a similar one we have used, Mattis, Iran, but maybe Iran can be part of it. We must not underestimate what's possible. Again, I make a comparison with Europe's history. The European Union was a Western European project, firsthand, in the beginning. Nobody could expect that the Warsaw Treaty countries, the Eastern European part, would fall. And as Pope John Paul II once stated, Europe will breathe with both lungs in the end. And that the European integration will cover all Europe, and we are on the way to that direction. So a lot is possible, but we have to go day by day, step by step.
Thank you. Jumping into that, because then I completely agree with you, and I think there is huge opportunities for the region through these Abraham Accords, and contrary to what many people suggested in the beginning, I think that actually the Abraham Accords also helped the Palestinian cause in a way, because there were several Abraham Accords countries that negotiated with Israel on certain benefits that helped the Palestinians in the context of humanitarian aid, food supply, etc., etc. And it could be argued that those things would have been much more difficult if the Abraham Accords would have not existed. But taking this into account, what is your perspective of the view of the EU and the EAS, the Foreign Service of the EU? Are they committed? Are they seeing these developments in a positive light, or are they still hesitant? If they are, for what reasons? And also, do they see the significance of the accords in the context of the Iran war that's going on now, and also in the context of the Gaza war, that the accords remained in place and the ties remain strong, and in some cases even grew stronger? What is the European perspective that you are hearing around you in the Parliament, but maybe also at the Foreign Service of the EU and the Commission?
I would say we have achieved something already in that regard, because in the very beginning, when in the first US administration under also the current president of the US, the Abraham Accords have been established. Some people were suggesting on European level, this will not last long, this is one more show effect, things like that. And today it's proven wrong, that one could or would have assumed something like that. Quite the other way around. The Abraham Accords stand strong, survived very difficult periods of time, waves, as I have called it before. So at least the Abraham Accords are more and more taken serious. That's the first thing. And by whom? Because your question was about the Commission and the EEAS. That's the European External Action Service. That's the abbreviation for, if you want to, the kind of foreign ministry of the EU. And we are talking here, obviously, about the executive branch, while we are in the European Parliament, of course, the legislative branch. And the legislative branch, the parliaments always have to be more visionary, or will always be more visionary. That's why we have the Abraham Accords network in the European Parliament. This is multi-partisan, and we drive things forward. And we also draw the attention to the Abraham Accords, not only in the sense to take them serious, but also in the sense to support them. And this is what we do informally. In many occasions, nearly in every occasion that's somehow given. When we talk about geopolitics, I always state, I also want to share it with you. And I didn't hear any, let's say, remark that this would not be true. That my view is that the Abraham Accords are in this century. So we have the 21st century. In this century, the Abraham Accords are the only positive geopolitical development yet. Or is there any other development of geopolitical meaning that would be so important, positively important, of course, as the Abraham Accords? There is none. There are several wars, negative. Several crises, negative. There are tensions in the UN system that has to be desperately reformed, is in desperate need of reform, negative. So it's really the Abraham Accords that form the only positive geopolitical development of our time. And this is what we share also with officials in the executive branch in order to get things going faster, stronger, more convinced. Of course, in the political spectrum, also, and especially in the European Parliament, we also have in the corners of the chamber the one or the other extreme view. I take it very serious, especially as an Austrian, especially with a view on how things can develop if anti-Semitism is increasing, if anti-Zionism is increasing. David Lega, the founder who has established the Abraham Accords Network in the European Parliament, I have mentioned before, shared with me a year ago the view, which is very convincing in a negative way, persuasive, that Israel became, in terms of anti-Semitism, the Jew among the states. So if you treat Israel badly, it's not in any way better than treating any Jewish person in a tramway or in the bus station badly. So these are things we also have to tackle in Europe. Maybe also, as I know firsthand, not only from media, but from friends at some American universities and so on, we have this sickness of the West and the world of anti-Semitism also today. Even more, we have to strengthen also the positive dimension and the positive approach, and first and foremost, the positive approach when it comes to the very region of Israel, our strong partner country, the only democracy in the Middle East, by the way, if we talk about democracy. And if we wish for peace and stability and future prosperity for the region, then it's the Abraham Accords what we have to foster. And maybe last point on this question, Martin, since you have mentioned Gaza before and the Palestinians, I mean, economic self-efficiency, self-responsibility will be an important thing, because it can't go on for another 40 years or more that the whole world is pouring money into this region, and people would misuse the money, would misuse funds in the field of education, but not becoming in any way mature and self-capable in an economic way. So the Abraham Accords cannot solve everything, but definitely the Abraham Accords will not stand in the way of such a development, but rather foster it.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions from the audience, a final question that taps in a bit on what you just said. As the leader of this Abraham Accord network in the European Parliament, what do you believe Europe has to gain also from these Abraham Accords? Because I think we discussed before whether the important gains for the region, the stability, etc., etc. You mentioned trade agreements with the EU. But are there other elements that could be a huge interest and gain for Europe? Also, I mean, I think the reality that we see right now, also looking at the war in Iran, is that Europe is very reluctant to directly engage with many developments that are happening in the Middle East. For good or for bad reasons. But what kind of opportunities would these Abraham Accords bring possibly to Europe? And is this also something that you hope to explore with the delegation that we are currently building together that I mentioned before? You will lead a group of members of the European Parliament going to Israel, going to the UAE, to explore and discuss exactly this, how Europe can be more relevant from the other side of the Mediterranean. So how do you see that?
Very, very important question. And here I also want to come in with my gratitude for, let's say, cooperating with us as the Abraham Accords Network in the European Parliament in undertaking the before mentioned study visit to the Abraham Accords countries, at least to two of them, Israel and the United Arab Emirates, with a number of parliamentarians from different political parties. This will be one more excellent ELNET cooperation. So thank you for that, and also meaningful because Europe can gain a lot and will gain a lot and might already have gained a lot due to the Abraham Accords. And I want to outline what and why. I have already mentioned before free trade agreements. We see as one of the main pillars of our own prosperity, also of our global outreach. And the Abraham Accords would be the excellent partner for a free trade agreement beyond what was thinkable years ago. So we should follow that path. Secondly, stability in the Middle East, sustaining peace in the Middle East will be important also for Europe because I would like to claim that Europe is today a very reliable partner worldwide for each and everyone. You have mentioned China and Russia before, and also other parts of the world might at the moment not be as reliable as Europe is when it comes to treaties and agreements and deals. And we need such partners also in other parts of the world. And if stability is given in the Middle East due to the Abraham Accords, we will find more of such reliability I've just pointed out. And the third point that's very concerning for many Europeans is migration. So especially since 2015, there were migration crises in Europe of various kinds. Tonight, in the European night, so beginning in a few hours, there will be negotiations on a so-called returns directive. And so a big European new act, a new law, making it possible to send people home without asylum status quicker and without too much bureaucracy, and especially when they commit crimes and have a proper trial, then they can and have to leave immediately, which has not been the case before in that case of Europe. So we are tackling that, but if the root causes of migration in Syria, which is very relevant for my constituency, my own country, Austria, for example, but also in other parts of the Middle East and beyond. If these root causes will be tackled, then it will be good. And I want to quote Ronald Reagan, who once said, "The best social program is a job." I always claim the best development aid is economic cooperation. And this applies very much to that area. If the Abraham Accords will be stable, will cause prosperity, and they have already started to cause prosperity and to trigger economy, then also the root causes of migration will be smaller. And this is a third field, beside also many more, where Europe itself, not only in a political viewpoint, but Europe itself in its very interests, in the interests of the Europeans, will benefit from the Abraham Accords.
Thank you very much, Lukas. I will take the opportunity to move to a first question coming from Larry Hochberg, one of the founders of ELNET. Larry, may I give you the floor to ask your question?
Sure.
I think you are on mute.
Based upon your recent trip to China, it's obviously that you're quite a diplomat and very friendly to Israel and understand Israel. But I'm wondering, based on your trip to China, do you feel in the long term, Western system of democracy will triumph as a way of running governments as opposed to the Chinese system, which is so different and yet so successful economically and has raised up so many poor people to the middle class? How do you view the long-term picture of world government?
Thank you very much. If I may already respond, Matis.
Yes, please go ahead.
Directly
Yes.
to that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Larry, for founding ELNET first place. Thank you for that. Secondly, that's the crucial question of our time. On the one hand, why I became a member of the China delegation of the European Parliament, which did its first visit in 8 years, by the way, now to China. It was an official trip. I would, at the moment, only use the official parliamentary channels to visit China. But it seems to be important to me because China will be relevant for even our grandchildren and maybe their grandchildren still, due to its pure size and economic relevance that you have just outlined already. Secondly, I think we must not be afraid for our model of human dignity, individual freedom-based liberal democracy, which I very much defend. Not only because of natural optimism, but also because of the diversity within these societies, within our systems of democracy, that usually leads to more creativity, quicker solutions, and let's say stronger outcome when it comes to innovation and production. But I don't want to underestimate China's economic weight. We have dependencies in Europe from China. You have dependencies in America from China. We have to diversify our risk. We have to also reduce these dependencies and become more self-capable. For example, in the field of raw materials, of rare earth, of mining. And thirdly, we need reciprocity. And this is what I shared with the Chinese counterparts, and what I always say, as long as Chinese companies have more opportunities in Europe than European companies would have in China, or with China and with Europe on the other side, then as long as this is the case, we don't have reciprocity and we will not have a level playing field. And we have to respect each other's rules. And that's why the European Commission, the European Union in its entirety became stricter in asking China to apply with the rules. And there was also a penalty last week against the Chinese company Temu. And there's more to come as long rules will not be respected. And now comes the long-term and most important point, what let's say also gives some reason to my optimism. That's demography. China has a huge demographic problem. China will shrink. I mean, in the West, especially in Western Europe, or in Europe in its entirety, also in other countries of the global West, we have demography problems, but the one in China might be larger than anywhere else. So the economic strength is not that sustaining as it might seem as of today, since there will be a lot to be tackled in terms of elderly care, in terms of pensions, in terms of income, and so on. But as you have said, it's absolutely right that this regime in China managed to create a middle class, a relevant middle class. And it might be on the longer run not too bad for the world that this huge country has at least stability. And I will always fight for human rights, human dignity, and this is extremely relevant for China. But let me say as a last point, in this month of May, last month, in the same month, we had the interparliamentary meeting with China, and we had also the joint parliamentary conference with the African Union. So I could, within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, compare firsthand, due to this parliamentary encounters, Africa and China. So I also see Africa as extremely important, and Africa is growing strongly, by the way, the other demographic direction in Africa than in China. But Africa is very diverse, as you know. It's larger than China, of course. It's many countries, not one, different to China, but it's very diverse, and you have to pick reliabilities, predictabilities in each and every sense. In China, at least, you have maybe things you don't agree with systemically, but you know whom to talk to.
Thank you. Very, very salient discussion. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question from Tom Flesh, chair of the ELNET US board. Tom, if you would like to ask your question, please unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Lukas, I just admire how busy you are and how many different areas that you're intimately involved with. And we really appreciate the good work that you're doing, and thank you. My follow-up is to Larry's question, and that is with democracies and the future of democracies. And you talked about the middle class in China. I always wonder, and I'd like to read about, can there be a middle class without freedom of opportunity? And if there is not a freedom of opportunity, how viable is there a middle class? And for example, in China. So that's one of my questions that I'd like to ask you.
Well, I can't pretend to be a China expert, and it's true the parliamentary work is a lot about setting priorities, and then priorities sometimes become a colorful mosaic of different obligations. So thanks also for observing that. What my personal observation is, without being an expert on China, is that due to this huge country, what they call it themselves, what they have is a specialist system, a system of specialists in many areas, with the idea that they could find for each and every task the best person. So I make it a bit more simple than maybe it's meant, but that's their approach. And I think you talk about freedom. I've just released a book about freedom. That's the most important thing that we have, and we have to protect as humans, as creation. Freedom is also nothing a political body has to give us as a gift or something. Freedom is something that's embodied within us as creation. But good politics has to defend freedom. Okay, that's our approach. That's my approach. That's our civilization's approach that I want to defend. The Chinese approach is different. Due to my observation, not only in these 100 years of the system they have today, but also already before, in terms of the general mood over not only centuries, maybe thousands of years. So I would say you talked about achievements, or is there an opportunity for somebody to have success in the end? I think in the specialist system, when somebody is a good engineer, also in this system, he will have the feeling of success, also without freedom. And this is from the outside, and only being engaged in parliamentary diplomacy with China, my overall impression over many years, that this might be one of the reasons that it works so far as it works, that the best engineer will be satisfied if he's rewarded for his engineering capabilities and his achievements, but he will not cry out for freedom.
Interesting. And Austria's position with social media and AI and those kinds of things, how are you dealing with those?
You mean generally or regarding China?
Generally.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an absolutely decisive moment in history. It's like the innovation of printing. It's like the innovation of the internet that changed not only technical behavior, processes, but thinking, and how thinking is going, how education is going, how work is going. And we don't yet know where artificial intelligence leads to. I'm not among the Europeans who are in the first place afraid. No, I'm in the first place excited that we have the opportunity to create our own approach with it. But we have to have the so-called human in the loop. And this is also true for the whole information sphere. I absolutely believe that not only parliamentarism is a part of a civilized free society, also journalism is. Even as a politician, one day I struggle with journalism, the other day I'm happy about it, but it's not about me, it's not about liking. It's about the very job of journalism. The same is true for academia. So these are pillars of our civilizations we maybe have tended to underestimate over decades because it was anyway given and it worked. But we have to preserve it in times of artificial intelligence. And to make these pillars understood and kind of enshrined in our mentality will be extremely important.
Thank you.
Lukas, maybe I can ask another follow-up question on the more international dimension that was just discussed, and it relates to your also strong focus on the transatlantic relationship between Europe and the US. Now, I think it's not a secret that the transatlantic relationship is under a lot of pressure recently, not only in the context of trade, but also in the context of NATO, and there's many other topics on the table. Do you see, and what is your experience of this relationship in the context of the Abraham Accords? And can the Abraham Accords facilitate a different road for discussions, cooperation, etc., etc., and how do you see that in practice if it's happening?
Absolutely. The Abraham Accords are one of the fields where the exchange and cooperation between the United States and the European Union can be increased and fostered and deepened. Why? Because Europe's military capability lies still in its member states. It's not on European level. That's our own task to tackle that and to develop that. We are already on the pathway of investing more in military, and that's extremely important because it's true that we were dependent of the US, and the US also did a lot for European security in the past, and this is nothing only the current head of the US administration would have stated. Also, the former presidents of the United States did so. But after the beginning of Putin, Russia's invasion in Ukraine militarily and hybrid warfare all over Europe and the world, Europe finally has started something, what these people like me have advocated long before already, to invest in its own military capability. But we are not there. But when it comes to the Middle East, the Abraham Accords are exactly the field where Europe can join. Europe can play a positive, constructive, substantial part in the cooperation with the United States. And this is one field. And another field, I will only touch it briefly now, is food security. The United States have dropped out of many development aid activities all around the globe. For 20% of them or something, I totally understand the policy decision. On the longer term and in a broader sense, I think it's wrong. But food security is so immediately clear as something people can do for people when children are stunting, as it is called, when children are starving, people are starving for many reasons, also for our interest when it comes to migration and root causes of it. Food security is a field where we can work together between EU and US when it comes to geopolitics, as well as many other fields. You addressed directly the transatlantic relation. In the first place, I'm among the ones who always advocate for not allowing ourselves on the European side to be provocated by the current US president. Because if you allow yourself to be provocated, you usually make mistakes. No? So we will remain calm. At least I recommend that all the time. We will also remain reliable. Where a deal is a deal for us, and we just do it. We just proved it with the tariffs deal and so on. From our side, there's no limbo. So what I observe coming from the current US administration is exactly that limbo. We are put into a limbo with a different approach every week, sometimes more than one time a week. And we have to remain calm. We should not go on the field and in the sphere of this constant limbo back and forth. That's not our style. This will also not be positive for the general development. And third point, it's extremely important that people in the United States in various fields, such as academia, civil society, parliaments, Congress and Senate, and also the member states. I mean, the United States, state level in the United States. These are our partners we talk to. We talk even more today under the current US administration than in the past with these levels because we need it, and this became a positive exercise during these times.
Thank you, Lukas. I have, I think, one more question before I will pass the floor to Tom Flash to close this very interesting discussion. And again, thanks so much for joining us. It's a question from Tom Shapiro. I see him in the screen. Tom, if you unmute yourself, please.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So my question is basically, as President Trump is negotiating to this potential peace treaty, do you believe that he is trying to make it where a lot of the Middle East countries will agree to join the Abraham Accord? It seems to me that behind the scenes, he's using the leverage to say to Saudi Arabia and many of these other countries, if we can develop peace in the region, we're expecting you to join the Abraham Accord.
Yeah, this would be the best possible positive outcome. The negative outcome could be, but I don't wish for that. And I would try to put it diplomatically. If the outcome would be we have peace, but we dismantle the Abraham Accords, we will have achieved nothing. So this must not be the outcome of this whole development at the moment. We have to avoid by all means to harm the Abraham Accords due to the unfortunate situation that the Iranian Mullah regime is still in place. I also observed the activity within the country and the willingness of people also in the armed forces and police units and the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, whether they are still ready to shoot their own people in the end. So as long as there will be no resistance among the armed forces against orders to shoot their own people, it might be difficult to change anything from outside. But what we can still decide is how we act ourselves, how we treat the Abraham Accords, how we conduct them in the future. And this will sustain. I hope also a peace deal with the Iranian Mullah regime will sustain. But I mean, how reliable is the Iranian Mullah regime? As we have seen in the past with JCPOA and so on, not very much, so not very reliable. So the Abraham Accords must not be dismantled at all.
Thank you. Thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for your interest in your leadership in the field.
Lukas, looking at the clock, I think I want to use the opportunity to thank you again.
That's
and
ethos.com/radio.
you.
Paid spokesperson. Time spent on application may vary. Online health questions required.
Yeah, that was someone else speaking from the radio, I think from the United States. No, but thank you so much for your work in the European Parliament, for being so committed to this cause, the Abraham Accords, but also the role of Israel in relation to Europe, in relation to the greater Middle East, your effortless support and energy to work on this topic, and also for your cooperation on many events with ELNET. It's really greatly appreciated. And our work also wouldn't be possible without leaders, politicians like you. And fortunately, there are also many others like you in the European Parliament that are working on these topics on a daily basis and trying to move things ahead in at the same time very difficult times, because I think the challenges that as you mentioned, the Abraham Accords are one of the, if not the only success story from the past decades from the Middle East. I think that summarizes a lot of things in one sentence. But very much looking forward to work with you towards the future, also on this delegation we are building with members of the European Parliament. Hope to see you soon. And with that, I will leave the floor to Tom Flesch, chair of the US board of ELNET, to make a couple of final closing remarks. Please, Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Lukas. This is a wonderful hour that we spent together, and very informative. I want to just add on to what Matti said and to others before that made comments. The work that ELNET is doing is very meaningful, and it's because of cooperation from our European friends that we are able to do things that really do inure to the benefit of Israel. Israel's economy, quite frankly, is surprisingly doing well. With the soldiers all enlisted and serving, it probably decreases the amount of available manpower or people power to work in the factories and produce, but nevertheless, they're doing well. The shekel is very strong, so there is confidence in Israel from those that you might not be hearing from, but there is interest in what Israel has to offer. And I want to thank you for your hard work. It's a good work for a good cause. And I also want to extend an invitation to you or anybody in your consulate or people that you have from Austria in Los Angeles. We'd be happy to have an event. We'd be happy to host you and have an exchange, because, you know, our supporters and our donors, they are people that believe in this relationship and the mission of ELNET, and it takes people like you to make it all happen. And we feel we've been very successful, and we thank you so much for your efforts. And all our listeners who are joining us, and we have a very loyal group who are passionate about the work we do. Thank you for your support. Increase your support. Unfortunately, the dollar is weakening in its strength, and therefore our expenses are increasing because we do transactions in Europe with the euro. So the dollar is weakening, and that means it doesn't have the strength. But we're optimistic, and we're optimistic because of people like you, and we appreciate you. And again, we open our doors to you here in Los Angeles. That's where I am, but we're throughout the United States to host you if you're here. And I look forward to meeting you, and perhaps maybe in Austria. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, all of our listeners, for being here today. To all our listeners, thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And in the event you want to make a donation, you know how to, and we'd appreciate it, because our funds are needed desperately to continue the work against these challenges that we are facing. So good day, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in, and it's a pleasure to see you all.